Hi, everyone.
Hi, Shireesh. Yes, you're audible. We're able to hear you.
I am unable to start my video because it says the host has blocked it.
You should be able to do that now. I've made you co-host, so you should be able to turn on your video.
All right,
Yes.
that's what. Okay.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Can you just write it in the chat box? Why, if you can hear me? Okay, cool. So, hi everyone, welcome to this session. I am Manika, part of NSRCEL marketing team. So, without further ado, I will like to start by giving a quick introduction about NSRCEL, that who we are and what we do. So NSRCEL is a startup incubator of IIM Bangalore, and we have been building startup ecosystem for over 2 decades, in which we are focusing on bringing in the entrepreneurs from different sectors, academia, as we are part of IIM Bangalore. So we have a good network of academia and the industry experts, domain experts. Either you are looking for guidance in marketing strategy, legal and finance, funding. So we will get you covered. So yes, this is how the impact looks so far for the NSRCEL. So we have been engaged with more than 166,000 entrepreneurs so far, either through programs, workshops, master classes. We have programs here for 12 months also, which is an incubation program, and pre-incubation is for 3 months. So far with the incubation, we have impacted 585 plus startups so far, and with the in Launchpad we have impacted more than 2200 plus. And talking about the impact, as you can see, the jobs created by our startups is so far but more than 9,000. So yes, talking about what we do here is you can see the programs that NSRCEL provides to the startups. So the programs in NSRCEL are created in a way that so that we can reach every niche in the business ecosystem. For example, we have a startup called Miti Cafe, which works with the employment for the people with special needs. Then we have a startup called Amagi, which is the one of the global leaders in the SaaS technology. And we have startup like Paradise, which provides the which is into the fashion hair brand colors. So this is how diverse is the startups of NSRCEL. And talking about the programs, we have different programs. Right now, the applications for 3 programs are open. One is Launchpad. So if you are a venture at ideation stage, prototype stage, you can go for that. If you are a venture at post-revenue stage or growth stage, you can go for incubation velocity. And if you are a women entrepreneur with the turnover of more than 30 lakhs per annum, we have a scale-up program for you called Goldman Sachs 10K Women Program. You can go for that. We have other programs as well, but for these programs, the applications are open. We will share the information in the chat box below. You can go for that. And if you think that somebody can benefit from these programs, you can also share the links with them as well. So yes, this session is also a part of Startup Essentials Week. We had back-to-back sessions this week with the ecosystem enablers and our partners as well, like Zoho, Microsoft, Google for Startups, Plum, ONDC. Today we have our session with ONDC. So yes. So NSRCEL provides a startup kit to the startups who are incubated with us. They get exclusive access to some special offers and discounts through the startup kit. So these are some of the products. Otherwise, we have more than 100 products and services. These are some of them. So that was pretty much about NSRCEL. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Shireesh Joshi. He is the Chief Business Officer and President, Network Expansion for ONDC. He is responsible for expanding the network in terms of participants and domains. Previously, he had roles in Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo, Airtel, Godrej, where he managed multiple brands, geographies, and market positions simultaneously and worked on businesses across India, China, and South Asia, working with various cultures and languages, and has over 30 years of experience delivering successful results with organizations and teams of varying capability and success. He is an industry and function leader. He often speaks at industry conferences, serves on various marketing award juries. He is also an alumnus of IIT Kanpur and IIM Bangalore. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you on right now for this session. So I think we can begin the session now.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Sir, you can share your screen if you want.
Yeah. So I thought I'll kick it off by giving a shorter version of our briefing and leave a lot more room for Q&A. And then we can take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, we will take the Q&A at the end of the session. You can drop your questions in the chat box and the Q&A section, which are given below.
In fact, I think that will be a good idea, that if they keep writing the questions, that'll be that'll then.
Yes, sir. We can begin now.
Presentations visible?
Yes.
All right. So let me quickly walk you through the purpose of ONDC, the key design ideas behind ONDC, and then walk you through some of the implications of what a network like ONDC can bring. The goal is to dramatically step change e-commerce penetration. And it was conceived at the time of the first pandemic, when the country was about to go into its first lockdown. And the need was felt to connect consumers in non-contact ways. And at that time, actually, the digital penetration of e-commerce was even lower. I think it was below 2% back in 2020. But despite the lockdown and the impetus to e-commerce, it's still at only about 6 to 7%. And that's B2C. If you look at B2B, it's only about 1 to 2%. So e-commerce penetration continues to be very low. And whatever penetration is there is largely a big city phenomena. And if you look at it, therefore, the contribution from rural areas and small towns, it's next to nothing. So from an India perspective, e-commerce is still a very niche idea. Some of the things that need solving for is that e-commerce today, in the way it's structured, is a closed structure. E-commerce takes place in closed platforms where buyers and sellers both have to be registered in the same app on the same platform. Only then they can transact. What this leads to is across categories, you therefore end up seeing a concentration of activity. So the first issue is there are very limited choices as a result. So if you're, let's say, a restaurant owner, there are really only a couple of apps where you can expect to get orders at scale. If you have a taxi, there are really only a couple of apps on which you can get rides at scale. If you're making stuff for home or office, again, only a couple of applications. So regardless of which category you're in, the options to really have a scale access for online commerce is very, very limited. And even that comes with its own terms and conditions. So in many categories for many applications, if a customer just decides to change their mind, the item has to be returned and the seller has to bear the cost of the return logistics. And if it's a replacement, not a return, then there's a third leg of logistics that has to be borne, or the commissions that have to be paid, or the time the seller has to wait to get the money. So all these terms and conditions are manageable for some large players who have joined e-commerce today, but are actually very difficult for especially small retailers to be able to bear. And that's why they have stayed out of e-commerce all this while. There are alternatives to e-commerce. You can set up your own website. You can create a store on a shopfront tool like a Shopify or a digital showroom, but then you don't have traffic. You have to spend to get and maintain traffic and on an ongoing basis. So regardless of which way you look at e-commerce, there are significant gaps and constraints that make it difficult to make it a viable business. So what ONDC is doing is creating a network that revolves around two interrelated principles. First, unbundling, and second, interoperability. Now, unbundling is the idea that one party does not need to do everything from end to end. So today we think of e-commerce as a complete end-to-end activity where all activities, all services, and their interconnect and all the technology behind that is done by one organization. But we are used to many spheres of life where actually unbundling is common. In fact, unbundling is the way where you get to the most optimal and most effective solution. Think about the entire BPO industry that India, for example, is very well known for, right? So the whole idea behind BPO is that companies can take their work processes and give it to a party outside, and that party can run just those processes which are connected with the rest of the company's operation. So it's still from an external standpoint, it's still a smooth operation, but those activities are being run by somebody who's an expert in those activities and also the most cost efficient. So companies have unbundled now for several years. Products are always unbundled. If you think about vehicles, cars, scooters, bikes, no car maker or a bike maker makes their own tires. They're made by some other company. Why? Again, the same principle that tire makers or tire making is an expertise. And so a specialist company makes them better, makes them cheaper than if the car maker were or the bike maker were to make them. So unbundling is how life happens everywhere except e-commerce. E-commerce is one of those few anomalies where we are used to actually completely the opposite. And in fact, we have come to believe that unless it is all bundled by the same party, we will not have a smooth experience. But you should pause a moment and think about experiences like, say, taking a flight. And you will realize that you actually go through 8 organizations in a single journey. There is one company whose taxi you've taken to the airport, second company whose security force is manning the entrance, third organization that is running the airport, fourth one that is manning the security for the bag and personal search, fifth one is the airline that you're flying, sixth is the catering service that provided food on that airline, seventh is the airport at which you land, eighth is the taxi you've taken. So you've actually in a single journey gone through 8 organizations without really feeling there was a gap. So unbundling interoperability is there everywhere except e-commerce, right? So the idea is, how do we now bring it into e-commerce? Interoperability, the idea is that for two parties to have an interaction or a transaction, both parties do not have to be in the same application. Now, let's take a look at banking. Thank God, banking has always been interoperable. So even before digital era, some of you might have experience writing checks. You write a check on your bank account and give it to somebody, they can deposit in their bank account. You don't have to open an account in that bank for you to be able to make that payment. So banking was always interoperable and the instrument was a check. Today, we have IMPS, NEFT, and now even UPI. And UPI, not only do you can have accounts in 2 different banks, you can even use 2 different applications. Right? So that's the interoperability, that somebody could be on Google Pay, somebody else could be on Paytm, or somebody could be on Amazon Pay. So, or somebody could be on Phone Pay. So it does not matter which are the 2 applications involved, but there is complete interoperability. We also experience interoperability in email. Right? So 2 parties who are interacting by email. In fact, you don't even know what is the email client the other party is using. You might be on Gmail, the other party might be on Outlook or something else. So email operates, is able to do this interoperability, or any system that has interoperability basically has to have a communication protocol that is understood, so that the 2 applications that are interacting in that interoperability both understand the communication the same way. So in email, for example, everywhere you have the same structure for email ID, right? Something at something dot something. So that's the protocol. So there is a protocol for email that allows different applications to interact with each other. So when you send an email to somebody, it gets received correctly. And then when they send it to you, you receive it correctly. So in email, that protocol is SMTP protocol. Likewise, you have the HTTP protocol for the internet. So that is what ONDC has done. ONDC has built the protocol for commerce, where if 2 parties on different applications have to have a commercial transaction, then you need a protocol that allows that bridge to take place. That protocol bridge is ONDC. So if you think about ONDC, what really it is, at its heart, ONDC is only a protocol and a registry. Right? Pretty much like the internet is HTTP and the internet registry. Everything else is individual companies that have built websites and services. It's not the central internet organization. So ONDC is a protocol. This is the first time anywhere in the world that an open network has been created for e-commerce. So anybody who participates here is actually at the leading edge of e-commerce in the world in terms of structure. Now let's understand the implication. In any e-commerce platform, there are essentially 3 kinds of activities. You can broadly group them into these 3. First set of activities are activities which are buyer facing, where a buyer is searching for a product, building a cart, making a payment. Second set of activities are ones which the provider or the seller has to deal with. So uploading their catalog, updating their inventory, managing orders or modification to orders like a return cancellation. And if it's a physical item that's being sold, then you need delivery services from the seller's location to the buyer's location. So these are the three broad groups of activities, and they are all connected seamlessly through the proprietary protocols or proprietary technology of that organization. When you go to another platform, so you go to platform 2, then you will see similar activities. They're all connected through all protocol. This time the protocol is different. And because the technology and protocol are different, these two systems don't talk to each other. So each platform becomes a unique closed universe by itself. And once in any category, you have a couple of closed universes that have achieved scale, then participants do not want to join a third and fourth, because why will everybody get together yet again and join one more platform where all of them are present, right? So that's why this structure leads to concentration of a few players. Now, once ONDC gets introduced, then what changes is that the activities are no longer done by one organization. Different organizations are doing different activities. They're still connected. They're connected by a protocol. This time it's an open protocol, ONDC, which everyone has in common. So the total solution is identical to existing e-commerce in terms of total activities that are covered. They're all connected. They still deliver a seamless solution, but those are the two important differences. Activities are being done by different organizations, and the protocol is public and common. So what you get is a single network where buyers, sellers, and logistics providers on different applications can all interact with each other and create any combination of solutions. So a buyer on any buyer application can buy from a seller on any seller application. And for the physical goods, either party can choose a logistics provider on any logistics provider application, and your entire e-commerce solution gets complete. Now, this is more than an academic rearrangement of parts. In fact, this is the part that really provides power to the idea of an open network. And more importantly, for all of you out there, this is what will eliminate several costs that startups face when starting a new business. And when those costs are taken away, then you can focus on just your product and service and enable that to scale. So let's understand that part how. Think about the buyer activities first. Any organization that has a user base and can build an application that has ONDC protocols enabled can become a retail buyer application. Who is a retail buyer application today? So we have two payment companies, PhonePe and Paytm, which have retail buyer applications. So these were payment consumers. They have converted to shopping consumers. We have two banks, Kotak and IDFC, who have also created a buyer application. So now you have two banks whose retail customers through the bank application can become shoppers. Similarly, we have a telecom provider, which is now in significant stage of readiness. And so those telecom consumers through that telecom provider's app can become buyers. In the future, who knows, we'll have social media companies or media companies, all sorts of organizations that have a user base, including companies that have built a user base through their D2C operations. They can become a retail buyer applications. All you need is a group of people who are shopping and an application through which they can shop. So that's contributing to the buyer pool. Similarly, a different set of organizations will contribute to the seller pool. So you have accounting companies that provide accounting to stores. They can connect sellers to the network. Or you have point of sale software companies that do the billing at the site of the store. They can enable the retail sellers. So if the point of sale software knows the catalog of the store, knows the inventory of the store, and if that becomes ONDC enabled, then that store becomes visible to the network. So now you can have a consumer on a telecom application buying from a seller on a point of sale software application. And either of them can then ship through a third party. So that's how you end up getting a network where different companies are contributing buyers, different companies are contributing sellers, and different companies are contributing delivery solutions. Now, this was theory till last year in April, when in your city, in Bangalore, the first order on 29th of April, coriander from one of the terrace farms in Bangalore got ordered and delivered the same day on 29th April last year. Since then, we have come a long way. And today we have a network of 10 buyer applications, actually now recently has become 11, collectively having more than 100 million buyers. And we have 29 seller applications, 35,000 sellers, nearly 40 lakh SKUs, and 7 logistics providers who are providing various kinds of delivery services. So this is now a collective network. So now a shopper on Spice Smart Shop can say, let's be looking for an item that could be present in, let's say, in YouEngage and Innobits and Digit stores. And so all three responses will come back. And on the Spice Smart Shop, the buyer can choose which of these they want to select and then place for delivery. So that's the idea. Now, this is what brings its power, because this does not therefore make any one party capable of providing scale. Scale is now available to everyone. So no matter how small a seller you are on whichever seller application, the entire universe of buyers across all the 10 buyer applications can shop from you. Right? So as a small player, let's say you're just starting out and you connect to ONDC network on any seller application, suddenly you have a pool of 100 million buyers who can find you and shop from you. No listing required on individual buyer application. You are only connected to the network. So that's what the powerfulness comes from the ONDC network. Now, here are some more organizations that are in various stages of development. And so you will realize that it's not e-commerce companies only. Companies of various kinds have interest and are actually in significant stages of discussion in terms of coming on board. So what does it mean for any single organization? How you should think about what it means for you? You need to, whatever you're creating, whichever product or service you're creating, plug into ONDC and you effectively complete your e-commerce solution. You don't have to set up all the business activities related to e-commerce. Other parties will be doing the complementary parts, and you'll be partnering with the best and cost effectively. Right? So if you think about, let's say, browsers on the internet, an individual small user does not use a different browser than, say, a large corporation. And so the tools that are available are not linked to size of the player. They're actually democratized and available to everyone. Likewise, the opportunity for business is also equally democratized, as this map shows that any buyer is able to sell to any seller, is able to shop through any seller application. And so all buyers and sellers are connected through this common network, and anyone can place an order on anyone. Let's understand a little bit more detail, because I know we're speaking to startups and they will have a fair amount of understanding of business flows and schematics as they think their services. So here's an explanation, or rather more than an explanation, a double click on how the network, the transactions will flow. You have buyers, a pool of buyers who are connected to various buyer applications. And these could be mobile apps, these could be desktop apps, these could be web pages, they could be IVRs, they could even be voice activated software like Alexa or Siri. Any one of them can be a buyer application as long as they have incorporated the ONDC APIs and gone through the testing and validation. Similarly, on the other side, you have sellers. Sellers are registered on various seller applications. These could be retailers, manufacturers, logistics providers. So creators or sellers of any product or service, they register on seller applications, onboarding their catalogs. When a buyer is looking for a product, his buyer application broadcasts the request to the network through gateway. Now, sellers are classified by categories of products, right? And the reason we do that is we do not want to overwhelm the network by broadcasting all searches to everyone. So for example, you do not want, let's say, a request for a kirana item going to a pantaloon store, or you don't want a t-shirt request going to a chroma store. So people are classified by categories, and so depending on the category, the request is broadcast to stores that have those categories of products. Now the stores will look at the request. They will look at the commercial terms that are being broadcast by the buyer application, and they will say, yes, I have the item, and yes, I agree with the commercial terms. Then the catalog entry travels to the buyer side, and the buyer is presented with a list of options that match his search requirement and that also fulfill the commercial expectation that the application they're on. So with that list, then the buyers do what they usually do, which is filter, sort, eventually select and add to cart and make a payment. And their journey is complete, with the tracking information. So this explains how, despite the unbundled nature, despite different entities doing different parts, for a buyer, the journey is the same. Search, receive responses, filter, add to cart, make payment, and then track. Right? So those are the same activities. So nothing changes in terms of the buyer journey. What changes is how the buyer journey gets supported and fulfilled. Here is now a way to understand ONDC and its power in a different angle. ONDC is not a product. ONDC is not an app. ONDC is a capability. Now, what is it capable of? And it is capable of allowing parties to combine in whichever fashion they wish, under whichever terms they wish, in order to be able to do business. So you do not have a fixed model where things operate only a certain way. They can mix and match in multiple ways. So let's take a look at this case where we have a buyer named Vijay. He logs onto his buyer application and searches, let's say, for buying atta. Now the gateway broadcasts this request to all the catalogs that have Kirana store. And let's say 2 responses have come back. Gupta Kirana store on one application responds with the 50 rupees for the atta without delivery. And Big Basket, which is an aggregator with many stores behind it as support, reports back with a 150 rupees price, but includes delivery. So now Vijay is presented with 2 options, 50 without delivery, 150 with delivery. He looks at the 100 rupee difference. Let's say he believes that he can find a delivery solution for less than 100. So he placed the request for atta through Gupta Kirana store. Now his buyer application knows that he's chosen a seller who does not have delivery services and who's not selected delivery services. So Vijay will get the option to choose delivery services. Vijay's location and the seller's location become an input to the search, and search will return now not Kirana catalogs, but it will search through logistics catalogs and return back organizations that can do delivery. So let's say Dunzo can do delivery for 50 rupees and Loadshare can do it for 70 rupees. Then he chooses Dunzo. Now that he's chosen seller and delivery, his buyer application prompts him for making a payment. And let's say they have embedded UPI payment or cash on delivery, and he makes a UPI payment of 100 rupees. So 50 for delivery, 50 for the atta, but a single 100 rupee payment. Now this is one way this transaction can flow. Let's now change something and see how the transaction will flow differently. Let's say that Gupta Kirana store also realizes that all stores tend to put the cost of delivery in the pricing itself so that it makes it easy for the buyer. And let's say Gupta Kirana store has said that my delivery costs that I've negotiated are 50 rupees for a delivery anywhere. So then he will say my price for the atta is 100 rupees, which is 50 for the atta and 50 for the delivery. So he'll quote 100 rupees. So now you have 2 sellers quoting 100 inclusive of delivery, the other 150 inclusive of delivery. Since both are inclusive of delivery, whichever Vijay chooses, delivery is already included. So he does not have to make a second choice. So in this version, Vijay is making only one choice, which is who's the seller. In the previous version, Vijay made 2 choices. He first made a choice of the seller, and because the seller did not have delivery services, therefore he had to make a second choice of delivery services also. So now in these examples illustrate that the model that comes into play is not determined by an intermediary, is not determined by a buyer or seller application. It's determined by what the buyer and seller want or are capable of. So buyer wants a certain product, it goes to that product, and the seller has certain constraints in terms of being able to deliver or not deliver, and therefore the choice of selection goes through for Vijay. Now here's a third way in which it could take place, which is Gupta Kirana store might say, hey, you know what, in my own pin code, I can do the delivery. I've been doing that. So I have a boy and a bicycle and he can go and drop things off. So if Vijay and the Gupta Kirana store are in the same pin code, then at the second stage, Vijay will get 3 options. They will get Dunzo 50 rupees, Loadshare 70 rupees, and he'll get Gupta Kirana store own delivery 0 rupees because usually stores don't charge. And then he can make a choice. So in this fashion, you will see that based on what the buyer is wanting and what the seller wishes to, or how the seller wishes to operate, that appropriate combination takes place and you have a commercial transaction. When we started, in terms of roles. So the role can be multiple. You can be a buyer and a seller both on the network. Today, we have many such examples. So we have retailers who are selling to consumers as B2C operation, but those retailers are buying delivery services on the network, right? They're logistics buyer. Or the same retailer is actually buying the same product from the distributor, which is a B2B case that has also gone live. So that's also possible. So in this fashion, an entity can be both a buyer or a seller. They just need a different buyer or a seller app to be able to do it. It's not the fixed role in that sense. We have many categories live. We have food and beverages, grocery, home decor, electronics and appliances, hyperlocal product, fashion, beauty and personal care, agri, B2C, mobility. All these are live on the network. And we have upcoming categories, health and wellness, financial services, services like teacher, electrician, plumber, etc., gig services. Those are all coming on the live fairly soon. Also, all in B2C, and now we've also started the B2B part of these categories. Now, when you have multiple categories, that also creates use cases that are not possible today. So think about a situation where a person based in Delhi is, let's say, posted to Kerala for a short-term assignment. This person wants to buy a suitcase, has to go to a marketplace to buy a suitcase. Wants to buy a flight ticket, has to go to a travel portal. Wants a service apartment for a year, has to go to an accommodation portal. Wants to learn the local language, may have to do an internet search to it. So 4 different needs, 4 different journeys, 4 different checkouts, 4 different experiences. But once all products and services are on ONDC network, then all he has to do is add suitcase to cart, add flight ticket to cart, add service apartment to cart, add a 10-lesson introductory Malayalam course to cart, check out, and you're done. So from benefit standpoint, buyers have the benefit of a single platform that can access all domains. In fact, they can also access all sellers in each domain. So they're not just seeing a few, they're seeing everyone. There's unified experience because now through a single interface, through a single portal, I can buy any category. So I don't have to go, if I'm going on a holiday, I'm not going on one app to book a flight, another app to book a hotel, third app to book my taxi to the airport. I don't need to do that. I can do it all in one single application. And if I'm doing it on one application, then I have only one interface to learn. I don't need to learn the construct and interfaces of multiple applications. So now the differentiator for buyer applications can only be experience because all buyer applications are essentially showing the same sellers. And going back to the internet example, all browsers show the same websites. So the difference between browsers is only the experience. It's not which websites they show and which websites they can't show because the universe of websites is the same. So ONDC works in a similar fashion, which is the universe of sellers is the same for everyone. And so buyer applications will distinguish themselves on the nature of experience that they provide. For sellers, there's a whole bunch of benefits, and I appreciate that most of you actually are likely to be sellers in terms of either a manufacturer or creator of a service of some kind. And so when you're a seller, you can be discovered by the entire buyer universe through just one registration. Yeah, pretty much like the internet again. So if I want to be seen by the entire world, I just need to publish my website once on one publishing platform. I don't need to publish it on multiple platforms, and I certainly don't publish it on the browser. Right? There is no such thing as publishing it on a browser because all browsers are meant to see all websites. So through a single registration, I'm able to be seen by the entire buyer universe. I get an opportunity to combine with other parties who are cost efficient, like in the BPO example, and therefore create a low cost access to the complete value chain. Operate on your rules, terms and conditions. So we give the example of Gupta Kirana Store saying I can do delivery within my own pin code, for example. So that's a terms and conditions that Gupta Kirana Store can lay down, and then win more orders on that basis. Because you're able to access more buyers through a single registration, so less admin cost, low cost access to value chain, so you have a much better realization from what the consumer pays. All of this leads to increased profitability, and of course autonomy and rules and terms. So all of this leads to increased profitability. Besides this, sellers also have an additional benefit, which is they will have access to insights. Now on marketplaces, very limited insights is made available to sellers, especially if it does not pertain to items sold by them. But seller applications can aggregate data, so they won't be sharing competitive information or PII, but they can aggregate data and they can provide some basic insights to sellers, suggesting geographies, product segments, pricing strategies, or a variety of things that can improve their competitiveness. The other important aspect is reputation. The only reason why anybody joins e-commerce is to achieve scale. And you cannot achieve scale unless people who have never heard of the seller are buying from it. So it cannot be the already known circle of buyers for that network, because then the opportunity remains limited. Opportunity really becomes unlimited when anybody who does not even know this application is willing to buy from them. So reputation becomes very important because that's the currency. How do I know this completely unknown seller is good? Well, you look at the reputation. And so reputation is a very important factor, but reputation is an asset for the seller. They are the ones who put in the effort. They are the ones who built it up, or the product, the manufacturer of the product. But in current marketplaces, this value gets locked up inside the marketplace. So when that product goes to another platform or the seller goes to another platform, then they have to start again from zero. So it was their effort, it was their asset, but it is not available to them. It's locked inside the previous platform. On ONDC, it is not locked inside any seller platform. It's available for everyone. So a seller can move from one seller application to another and still retain the reputation that they have built. And finally, no disintermediation risk. There is a risk currently in e-commerce where retailers are afraid that marketplaces will observe what is the products being bought, and then they will create their own supply chain and substitute it, and thereby disintermediate these sellers. So that risk goes away on ONDC because no one party is doing all the business activities and no one party has all the data. And finally, opportunity for telecom or tech companies, sorry, not telecom companies, for technology companies, is that you can now scale up your technology very easily on the back of e-commerce. Right? So let's say you're a image processing company that makes applications for the fingerprint devices and entrance logics that gets put up in terms of people entering. So that's one application. Or you could be providing solutions to the weather industry to read the weather map and make a prediction, whatever it be. So if you're an expert in visual sort of image processing, then you could actually help a handcart vendor, the thela wala, build a catalog. Right? So the thela wala aims his mobile phone with your application at the thela. It takes a picture, scans it, is able to identify all the fruits and vegetables. And all he has to do is enter the rupees per kilo, rupees per dozen. And his catalog is ready, and maybe not just one language, in 25 Indian languages. And so now you've created, through your existing strength, you've created an e-commerce tool. And if, let's say, your commercial terms are free to download and only, let's say, 0.1% for every transaction, then for every 100 rupees, the seller who's earned an order through your application has to pay only 10 paisa, which they will certainly not mind paying 10 paisa out of a 100 rupee amount. And so that becomes an opportunity, therefore, now, let's say, for this image processing company to really scale up by creating an easy adoption mechanism and an affordable one. So that, in a nutshell, is what ONDC is about in terms of benefits to buyers, sellers, and for technology companies. A little bit about who we are and who we are not. So we are an open network, we are a capability, we are an infrastructure. We are not an app, we are not a platform, we are not a product. So you will not download ONDC and start shopping on it. ONDC is like the QR code of UPI. You don't download the QR code and use that to pay. You download a Paytm, a Phone Pay, an Amazon Pay, or a Google Pay. You will download one of those, and that's the interface through which you will do transactions. So same here in ONDC. There'll be applications that you'll have to download, or you may already have them as they update the ONDC feature, and through that you can do all your shopping. ONDC is not one fixed model, it's an infinite model, as the Vijay buying art illustrated, that you can add and subtract various legs very flexibly. And so thereby you can create new kinds of services that today are not possible in the marketplace model. It also eliminates the need for a central intermediary, which is great news. There's very little risk of the disintermediation. And lastly, we operate as a market and community-led initiative. So whatever new we are creating, we socialize it with the network and with the sectors, with the players in that sector. And based on their feedback and input, then we freeze and finalize. So we operate as a market and community-led initiative, more like a cooperative in that sense, rather than as a regulator. So the expectation certainly is that we will democratize digital commerce and move it from platform-centric to a network model. And when we started, the first step really was to establish an advisory council that could guide the leading employees or intended employees for this project. So many of these names will be familiar: people from technology, retail, government sectors, from financial sector, who have had successful organized attempts at a variety of in their respective fields. It's all of them come together and make it possible for ONDC to benefit from their experience. We began in June 21 with the council being established then by DPIIT. In a couple of months, we had a rollout plan approved by the Honorable Minister, and by December, we had completed the end-to-end transaction by the first cohort. And we also got established as a Section 8 company. For those who do not know, Section 8 is a private sector company that will not be listed and that will not be required to give dividends to its shareholders. So whoever has invested in this company has invested as a contribution to the nation, not from standpoint of making profit. So we got registered in December. The network went live in March. The first transactions began in April, and then we continue to expand across cities and categories. And we had a beta launch in September of 22. Today, as I said, we have almost 30,000 sellers, 36 lakh products. We're present in more than 200 cities, and 2 of them we have now opened to the public formally. In many other cities also people can shop, but we've not formally announced it to the public there. So now questions that you will have, and typically as a manufacturer or a creator, you'll have a question: how do I join? Do I join as a seller application, a buyer application? Do I join as a technology service provider? How do I join? So what we recommend is you add your email in the attendance in the chat box. So we'll have that available. I understand you're recording, so if whoever is recording it can just summarize those emails. We will send you this presentation, and a recording of the call will be made available by the NSRCEL, I hope. But we'll send you a profile sheet link, and you tell us a little bit about who you are which role do you want to play on the network as a buyer app, seller app, technology service provider, or provider of some components. So explain that. And then nominate a business and a technology resource, and we will take it from there. So you'll then develop your application, and we have provided the sandbox and all the testing mechanism and protocol, by which first through sandbox, then through a pre-production environment, and finally in a production environment, your app will be hosted, and then you can do the live transaction. If you do not want to build an application yourself, you just simply want to sell your items as a retailer, manufacturer, craftsman, and don't want to create an app, then all you've got to do is go to our website, ondc.org, click on Network Participants tab. You will see a list of participants, and it can be filtered for seller applications. And you can then choose any of them, or you can speak to all of them and decide who you want to partner with. So that's it from standpoint of explaining what ONDC is. I will leave this slide on because usually most questions require reference to this, and let's dive straight into the Q&A. So Ayush is asking, how is ONDC different from GEM? Many ways. First of all, GEM, like every other e-commerce platform, is a closed structure. So only those who are registered as sellers in GEM can sell to buyers, which are the government departments registered with GEM. Right? And so you and I can't shop on GEM. That's a closed network for a very specific audience, specific purpose. ONDC will connect everything. It's like the internet. Right? Internet isn't just private, or internet just isn't government or public sector. Internet is something that anybody can use. So that's the idea, that ONDC is a place where you can shop or buy anything. GEM is only looking at product categories that the government is interested in. But on ONDC, you'll have categories that the government would not be interested in. So for example, choosing plumber services, or wanting to buy toys and games for children, or buying gifts to give away, although that might be common. So their requirements being different. Therefore, GEM is e-commerce, but it's a closed platform. ONDC is e-commerce, but it's an open network. So Priya's question.
Sir, if you don't mind, I'll just curate the questions for you, because I think many of them were answered through your presentation only.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think this is answered pretty much. And
yes,
the merchant who wants to enter into ONDC. So Spriya, you can share your email ID with us in the chat box. We will share it with the ONDC team. Then, so marketplace players, okay, Purva is asking, can marketplace players sell on ONDC?
Yes, they can, and they've already started. So we have Snapdeal, which is live on the network. So that's an e-commerce marketplace that's come. We also had Meesho, which went live, but they had some technical issues which they're fixing it. So they're temporarily off the network, but they'll join back as soon as they fix those. So yes, the answer is not only can they, but they already are, and that journey has begun.
Got it. So Rajeshwar is asking about the businesses like counseling services or the HR services. Yes. Can this be used by the service businesses?
Yes, any of those services can be done, all human related services. So HR services, architects, chartered accountants, or tools and skill based ones like carpenter, plumber, electrician, anything, any service can be sold on the network.
All right. So Shiva is asking that we are an e-commerce platform with multiple products. So how can they upload on the ONDC?
So as you see on the screen, the icon at the bottom represents the manufacturer or the seller, and you have a bunch of brands that are seller application, right? Go Frugal, eSamuday, Growth Falcon, ZVital, Falcons AI, UEngage, Innovbits, etc. So you can find that list on our network participant page on our website, and you can work with any one of them.
Got it. So there's one more question, that does ONDC have software product selling as a category?
Anything that can be sold. So let this be a generic answer to anybody who's asking, can we sell toys? Can we sell HR services? Can we sell software products? If it can be sold, it will be on ONDC. Or it requires anything that is catalogable and has a buyer and a seller, we can do it. Now,
so there's a question by
not everything will happen simultaneously. It will happen over time, but all of it will happen. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So Shiba is asking that there is an app named One App by DA Bank. which provides the single window platform to access different e-commerce sites. And she wants to understand how this is different from ONDC.
So Shiva, I'm not familiar with one app, and I'm not sure what exactly it does, but if it is giving access to e-commerce sites, it sounds like it is allowing discovery across multiple e-commerce entities, but eventually you will have to buy on that e-commerce entity. You cannot buy it on one app. E-commerce entities will not let you take over if you are one app. The relationship with their buyers, they would want to keep that as a proprietary advantage. So you're only like a search service, but eventually the transaction is taking place on the e-commerce side. We are different that these are not being done by different entities. They're being done by the buyer application itself, the search, and it was able to search all the sellers on the network. So it's able to provide that same single window access, but in an open fashion. And the consumer can simply go to any other buyer application and still see the entire universe of sellers. If you leave one app that you've described, I do not know whether you can see the same universe of sellers in any other app. You can interchange one app with something else. So open networks allow that flexibility.
Got it. So there is one more question by Sayali. She wants to know that from a seller's perspective, how can one draw up the logistics strategy?
It's your choice. If you can deliver it yourself, do it. If you can contract somebody who can deliver it efficiently, do it. Or if you have neither, you want to buy the delivery service on the network as a back-to-back transaction, you can do that as well. So you have the flexibility of choosing either a permanent solution or a solution on the fly, depending on your context and your need.
So there's another question. We'll quickly take the question. So how do I get, somebody is asking, Mayur is asking that localized buyers and sellers on this, that how do they get to say that these are the localized buyers and the other are the sellers buyers on the platform? Can they create their own buyer or seller app or not?
Yeah, anybody can create their buyer seller app. There's no restriction on who can or who cannot, but the validation everyone will have to do. And so you'll have to pass through our testing protocol for if you build your own application for that to go live. But yes, anybody can build their own. Now, localized is not a network feature. It's a buyer application sorting feature. And so the location information about each seller is built into their catalog. If the buyer application wants to show who's closer, who's further away, they will sort that information by distance, and that's how they will present it. But the information is there as part of ONDC network.
Got it. And what if somebody wants to have both buyer and seller, both profiles?
Yes, in fact, if you're a marketplace, you're required to have both profiles. You can come one first and the second later, but you're required to have both profiles.
I think, we have a lot of questions today. So how does the ranking of vendors happen on the platform and who owns the data? Gaurav is asking, and
Okay, so data is owned by whoever is party to the transaction. Now, at the time that the buyer is searching, there is no transaction. So all the search activity is visible only to the buyer application. Only when the search results in the buyer selecting something and has confirmed that, okay, I will now buy this item from this particular vendor, that's when, for the purposes of billing and for purposes of shipping, that confirmed customer's data travels to the seller. A seller will know all transactions that they have been part of. So each party knows only those transactions and that data which they are part of. The rest of the data is not visible to them. And ONDC does not keep any data. I hope, Gaurav, that answers your question. Second part of your question was, how does conflict resolution such as refund takes place? So first of all, refund is not a conflict. Refund is a request. And if the request is met, there is actually no conflict. We already have refund cases on the network. People have requested for refunds that they've been given. So refund works pretty much the same way, which is like you had a request for a product that resulted in a seller responding and eventually the buyer then paying. This now works exactly in reverse. Right? So if the buyer has said that I want to return this product, then the seller initiates the journey. Now, seller has to determine what the buyer has to do. Buyer just simply returns it as is, and the seller will accept it. Buyer needs to take a picture and send it so you can approve it in advance. Or the buyer has to wait till the product arrives to the seller will examine it, confirm it's their own product, and then pay. So they will basically reflect the test or a criteria that they might need to fulfill before the refund gets paid. And after that, the refund will happen. Now, in order to ensure that this is not an extraordinary delay, many applications might step in and say, hey, I will refund you and I will collect it from the seller later, because they want to make sure that the buyer does not have to wait till they forget about what it was all about. So those are all user experiences that can get created. Now, if there is a dispute, then first, the way the dispute will get treated will be directly between the buyer and seller applications. The protocol allows for transmission of error codes and transmission of these requests. And so it will be transmitted digitally from the buyer side to the seller side, and the seller side has to respond. If the seller side refuses to comply with their requirement, or if the buyer side has asked for something that is unlawful or unreasonable in this, then that gets escalated to what we call the online dispute resolution mechanism. So all the history of the digital transaction that was originally signed and all the subsequent exchanges then travel to the online dispute regulating arbitrator, who then makes a judgment that the participants then have to follow.
Got it. So there is one more question, that does ONDC help services like yoga or like the freelance courses or something in building their venture or something?
Blanket answer to all, the answer is yes. Whichever product, whichever service, the answer is yes. The only thing is yoga, for example, is not currently live. So the timing may be something that we'll have to come back on. But whether it can go or not go, the answer is always yes.
Got it. So, oh God, there are so many questions popping up. Okay. Okay. So what are the commercials like in ONDC for a merchant? Is it different for different buyer apps?
That doesn't change it. Yes, it is. And so that will change it a little bit for the merchant. Different buyer apps can request for a different percentage. And depending on the seller's propensity, they may choose to comply or not respond. So if a buyer says that, okay, a buyer application says that I have a buyer that is looking for a box of pencils and I want a 10% commission. Whereas all the stationery shops say that, you know, we can go up till 3-4%. So when a 10% request comes, then they will not respond. So that's really how the structure is. Now the fee in all this, the seller application, seller will have an arrangement. The buyer will simply transmit a commercial expectation in terms of what fee they expect and when, and that's expected to go through.
So I think there was a question regarding the change in country, that if a company needs to do a business in a particular country, then it needs to have a license regarding that for doing the business. Is ONDC going to remove it?
No, we won't remove it. So we don't invent or we don't make laws. Whatever laws are in the country, we simply have to comply with them. So if you are in a category that requires, let's say, certification before you can export, then you have to get that certification. It does not matter whether you do it without digital support or you're doing it through ONDC. It does not matter, because that pertains to the rules regarding that category, not regarding to the method of export. So nothing changes in terms of law, but we are enabling across the border trade. In fact, hopefully by July or August, we will have our first use case between a buyer in Singapore buying from a seller in India, and thereafter then we'll build more use cases. So international orders are very much part of the plan, and in fact, that plan is underway.
So guys, 3 to 4 minutes more, then we will quickly wind up. So there is one more question, that how is the customer care of ONDC? Because customer care is very important for the buyers or the sellers app. So how does it work?
So customer care works like it does with any unbundled application. Right? So just think about if you were to buy, let's say, a flight ticket on Make My Trip for a Vistara flight from Delhi to Bombay. Now, Make My Trip will have a customer care because they have to help you with the buying process. And if you have a problem, it's somewhere in that process where either the ticket you wanted, you didn't get, etc. All that has to be sorted out with the ticketing agent, which in this case would be, let's say, Make My Trip. But the service delivery is by the airline. If the flight is late, you don't talk to your travel agent, you talk to the airline. If your bags get misplaced, you talk to the airline, you don't talk to your travel agent. Right? So it's very clear that anybody who's, regardless of playing any role, you have to have customer service. It's not one party. So buyer applications will have to have customer service to handle their responsibility areas. Seller applications will have to have customer service to handle their responsibility areas. And they do. So today that is the case. And it's required by law. So both buyer and seller applications qualify as e-commerce entities under the law as currently defined. And therefore they're required to have grievance officers and a setup to be able to handle these customer questions.
Got it. So there is one more question. I think I'll take 2 questions more. So one is that if I am a Kirana store, and if they register on Magic Pen buyer app, so will that person be visible on the Paytm seller app automatically, or does that person need to follow any steps?
Okay, so first of all, you're confusing buyer and seller application ideas and even the roles that they're currently on the network. So if you look at the slide on your screen, at the bottom are the seller applications. So if you're a seller, you'll be registered on one of those organizations. Paytm is a buyer application, not a seller application. So a buyer on Paytm will be able to buy from your shop regardless of which seller application your store is registered on.
So Sumana wants to ask whether the aggregator businesses will be affected by ONDC.
That depends on what strategies they choose. So if they choose to participate, they actually stand to benefit quite a bit. But if they choose to stay away, then yes, it can significantly dent their business situation. So it makes sense for them also to join.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you so much, sir, for this session. That was really insightful. We learned a lot about ONDC, that how it is changing the e-commerce penetration, enabling the businesses to accelerate their growth, and most importantly, how ONDC is acting as a capability, especially through your case study. So it was really insightful. Thank you so much.
Most
So
welcome.
would you like?
I will encourage everyone
Yes.
to go to our website, and there is a 8.5 minute video that essentially, in an animated form, illustrates what I did in the presentation. So even for those who have attended the presentation, even if you get the recording link, I think that video might serve as a better recap because you already attended and had your questions addressed. The final one is, if you want to get in touch with us and figure out how you can join, team@ondc.org. That's the email address. So you write to team@ondc.org and somebody will connect you to the appropriate parties there.
Great, sir. So guys, if you have any other question, if your questions were not answered by us right now because of the time constraint, you can go to team.ondc at
team@ondc.org. Let me write it.
Okay. Yeah. So we are writing it down. You can go and address your concerns over there, and whatever questions you have, you can ask them and you will get them resolved. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Yes, it was a lovely session, Shiva. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Samit.